Now, Abigail and Nabal, this is in chapter 25. Beautiful story here with Nabal and Abigail. Let me just kind of run through it quickly. Make sure we can finish the book today. The story introduces David out in the desert, and David is protecting Nabal's sheep. Nabal is a rich guy. He's got many sheep and goats. David is protecting the guy's sheep. Who hangs out in the desert? In the desert, that's where the banditos are. That's where the criminals are. And so basically it's criminals out. David is protecting Nabal's sheep from these criminals, the thieves and various people who would hang out there. David sees that Nabal is shearing his sheep and he's going to, kill some of his sheep and have some of the meat and stuff. So David sends down to Nabal and says, hey, I've been protecting your sheep, man. How about a little bit, we can kill a couple of sheep too and, have some food and stuff. Nabal says, who is David? And blows David off and says, David, out of here and stuff, and pushes David off. And David says to his guys, get your swords on. We're going to go down and take that Nabal out. We've been out here working our tails off for this guy. And so David gets real serious about it and stuff. And then what happens? In the first verses, it describes this woman, Abigail, and it says she was intelligent and beautiful woman. She was an intelligent and beautiful woman. By the way, is the narrative setting you up later? Is David going to marry this woman? She's intelligent and she's beautiful. What happens? She's married to Nabal. That's a problem. Nabal, what's his name mean? Nabal means fool. His name means fool. Okay? So Abigail finds out that David's coming to kill her husband, and what does Abigail do? Abigail gets all sorts of food and brings the food out on donkeys to David. And then Abigail says this, may God deal with David, be it ever so severely, if by morning I leave one male. That's what David said. Then she says, she fell at his feet and said, my Lord, let the blame be on me alone. Let the blame be on me alone. In other words, does she sacrifice herself on the behalf of her husband? Do you ever see a woman sacrifice herself on the behalf, trying to protect her husband? Okay? And she does that. Let it be on me alone. Please let your servant speak to you. Hear your servant has to say. May my Lord pay no attention to that wicked man Nabal. Who's she referring to? That's her husband. Does she know her husband? She knows the guy. And he is just like his name. His name is Fool. This woman, she's intelligent and she's beautiful. Does she know her husband's a fool? Yes. She knows her husband's a fool. Are many women married to husbands that are fools? Don't ask my wife. Anyways, but what happens? Does she sacrifice herself? Does she put herself down and say, David, let it all fall on me. Let it fall on me. Spare Nabal, her husband. Is this woman noble? David then takes the food, backs off and stuff, and then let me just finish the story with her. You see what happens. She goes back to Nabal. What's Nabal doing? Nabal's partying. He's drunk. Do you tell a drunk man anything? No, she does not talk to him when she's drunk. When he wakes up the next morning and he's sober, she tells him what he's done. And it says his heart failed. She tells him his heart failed, and 10 days later, the Lord took him. 10 days later, who did it? Did David do it? David didn't do it. No, the Lord took him. Now Abigail is what? She's a widow. Okay, can David marry her without having to, as David didn't kill her husband? The Lord took him. So David then marries Abigail. And by the way, what happened to David's earlier wife, Michal? Does anybody remember that? Yeah, exactly. She was given to one of David's friends, like his best man kind of thing. We've seen that before. She was given to his best man, and now David marries Abigail. And David's going to have problems in this area. I don't mean to say David's perfect. So, yeah. Now David just goes to Ziklag, to the Philistines. David goes back to the Philistines, to a real far south here, real far south city called Ziklag. It's out of the way. David goes down there and actually joins the Philistines then. And it's real interesting. In this chapter 27, it mentions this. So on that day, Achish gave Ziklag. It has belonged to the kings of Judah ever since. That statement in chapter 27, verse 6, actually indicates, and Ziklag has belonged to the kings of Judah ever since. The kings of Judah. Does that show that this verse was written after the kingdom split? Do you remember after Solomon, the kingdom split north and south? This verse indicates that 1 Samuel was written after the time of Solomon, when the kingdom split. So this is kind of a little indication. It's kind of a little thing, and it's not a big deal, and I it's just a little thing, but just it does occur there. Now, David spares Saul. We'll hit this quick. Saul goes into a cave. What's Saul doing? Saul's taking a dump in a cave. Turns out David is in the cave. I don't know how you guys do this, Saul. Anyways, David's in the cave. David's got his knife. Saul, when he's doing that, is he totally vulnerable? Totally vulnerable, okay? David could take him out. David cuts a little piece of his robe off. Saul comes out of the cave, anyways. David comes out and says, hey, Saul, you missing a little something? Saul goes, oh. And then what's Saul do? Then do you remember how Saul changes? He says, oh, David, my son David, I love you, David, and stuff. This is all baloney stuff. But is Saul bipolar kind of thing? You know what I'm saying? I'm sorry, but anyways. So Saul comes out, pants in the cave, David, my son, Second time, David's out there with his guys at night. They're up on a hill. Saul's down in the valley. Who's Saul's general that's protecting Saul? Who's Saul's general? Abner. Who's David's general? Joab. Does anybody remember that? David's general is Joab. What does Joab do in the narrative? Joab does what to people? Joab kills people. Okay, that's Joab's general. David's general, Joab, kills people. Saul's general, Abner, is actually a pretty good guy. Anyways, Saul's general, Abner, and so then they're going to have that kind of a setup and stuff. So what happens is David comes down into the area where Saul's sleeping and steals Saul's spear and his water jug and takes it back up on the hill, and he says, hey, Abner, you were supposed to be protecting King Saul. Hey, Saul, you missing a little something? And Saul's spear and his water jug's gone, and Saul does this again. Oh, David, my son David. He goes off like that again. Anyway, so David... But by the way, what does David say? And this is the important line here. David respects the king, and he says what? Don't touch the Lord's what? Don't touch the Lord's anointed. David is really careful not to hurt Saul. And basically, David is leaving God to take care of Saul. He will not strike Saul, even though he had opportunity. And even though his own guys are telling him, strike him through, David won't do it.